You have 1 hour to leave this house.
My father gave me 1 hour to leave the only home I'd ever known. He had no idea what I already owned. 1 hour. That's all he gave me. 60 minutes to pack 26 years of my life into 2 suitcases and walk out a door I'd walked through every single day since I was a child. My name is Michael Bennett, and this is the story of the night my own father stood in the doorway of our house in Columbus, Ohio, pointed down the driveway, and told me I was no longer welcome. What he didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was that less than 24 hours later, I would be standing in front of a home so large it had its own gate, its own code, its own name. Because what happened between that porch and that gate is not the story you think it is. There was a reason my father never knew what I had built. There was a reason I let him believe I had nothing. And by the end of tonight, you'll understand why the man who threw his own son out into the street was the one who ended up with the most to lose. If you want to know exactly how a father's biggest mistake became his son's greatest secret, stay with me, because this story is only just beginning. To understand how I ended up in front of that mansion, you have to understand what my family thought they knew about me. For years, they believed I was barely getting by. A son who couldn't hold down a steady job, who borrowed money more than once, who seemed to be falling further behind while my younger brother climbed higher every year. That's the version of me my father believed when he pointed toward the driveway that night. But here's the question that's going to follow you through this entire story. How does a man everyone had written off end up owning a home worth more than his father's entire life savings? And a second question, one that matters even more. Did my father ever suspect the truth, or did I make absolutely sure he never would? Because the truth is, everything my family believed about me was something I built on purpose, piece by piece, lie by lie, for almost 4 years. And the reason I did it will change the way you see this entire story. What you're about to hear isn't just about money. It's about a son who let his own father humiliate him in front of the whole family, because exposing the truth too soon would have cost him something far more valuable than pride. Stick around, because the reason behind that choice is something very few people would have the patience or the discipline to pull off. To understand what led to that night, you need to go back 4 years, to the day everything started to change, though nobody around me noticed it at the time. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the older of 2 sons. My father, Richard Bennett, built a modest construction business from nothing, and he was proud of it in a way that shaped everything about how he saw success. To him, a man's worth was measured in hours worked, contracts signed, and money visibly earned. My younger brother, Daniel, followed that path exactly the way our father wanted. He joined the family business at 22, worked long hours, drove a truck with the company logo on the door, and never once made our father question whether he'd made the right choices in life. I was different, and that difference cost me. I studied finance in college, something my father never understood or respected, and after graduation I took a job that paid modestly but taught me something no one in my family valued at the time: how money actually moves, how it grows, how it hides. I started investing small amounts I saved from that first job, and I made a decision early on that I would never tell my family how well things were going. Not because I was ashamed, but because I had learned something about my father that most people never see about their own parent. He couldn't stand the idea of someone else succeeding quietly, without his permission, without his blessing. So when my early investments started paying off, when a property deal I'd taken a risk on tripled in value, I said nothing. I let them believe I was still struggling. I drove an old car. I wore the same jackets for years. I let my brother make jokes about my failing career at Sunday dinners, and I laughed along with everyone else, because every dollar I quietly earned was a dollar my father could never take credit for, control, or use against me. What none of them knew was that by the time I turned 26, I had already signed papers on a property that would change everything. A home so far outside anything my family could imagine that revealing it too soon would have raised questions I wasn't ready to answer. I had a plan. I just didn't know how soon I'd be forced to use it. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The night everything came to a head started like any other Sunday dinner at my parents' house. The same dinner we'd had almost every week for years. My mother had made pot roast. Daniel was talking about a new contract the business had landed. My father sat at the head of the table the way he always did, and I could tell almost immediately that something was different about his mood that night. Halfway through dinner, he brought up money, the way he often did when he'd had a drink or two, and he started in on me directly. He asked when I was going to get serious about my life. He asked if I was ever going to stop wasting my potential. And then he said something he had never said quite so bluntly before. He said he was tired of supporting a grown man who couldn't take care of himself, and that if I couldn't show him real progress, real proof that I was building something, he didn't want me under his roof anymore. I want to be honest with you, at that moment I had a choice. I could have shown him the papers sitting in my car. I could have told him about the property, the numbers, the truth. But something in me refused. Maybe it was 4 years of swallowed pride finally reaching its limit. Maybe I wanted him to say it out loud, to actually go through with the threat he'd made so many times before without ever meaning it. So I said nothing. I let the silence sit there at the table while my mother tried to change the subject and my brother stared at his plate. My father took my silence as confirmation of everything he already believed about me, and he stood up from that table, walked to the front door, opened it, and told me I had 1 hour to get my things and leave. Not for the night. For good. My mother begged him to reconsider. Daniel wouldn't even look at me. And I walked past all of them, up the stairs, into the bedroom I had slept in since I was a child, and I started packing, knowing something none of them did, that this house, this table, this life I was being thrown out of, was about to become the smallest thing I owned. I didn't cry that night, and I didn't argue. I packed 2 suitcases with the same clothes I'd worn for years, walked past my father standing silently by the door, and drove away from the only home I'd ever known without saying a single word to him. I checked into a motel off the highway, the kind with a flickering sign and thin walls, and I sat on the edge of that bed for almost an hour before I finally opened my laptop. For years earlier, I had taken almost everything I'd saved and invested it in a piece of land outside the city, land that at the time seemed like a reckless gamble to anyone who might have known about it. Nobody did. That land had been rezoned, developed, and turned into one of the most valuable residential areas in the entire state, and the home I had built on it, quietly, over 3 years, using contractors who had no connection to my family or my father's business, was sitting empty, fully finished, waiting for a day I never expected to come this soon. I had planned to reveal it eventually, on my own terms, when I was ready, not like this, not thrown out with 2 suitcases in a motel room. But sitting there that night, something shifted in me. I called the property manager who had been overseeing the final walkthrough, and I told him I was moving in the next day. The following morning, I drove through the same streets I had driven 100 times, past my father's neighborhood, past the modest houses and the modest lives everyone around me had accepted as the ceiling of what was possible, and I pulled up to a gate that opened automatically because it already recognized my car. I parked in front of a home with more rooms than I would ever need, walked through the front door alone, and stood in the entryway of a house that had been legally mine for over a year, a house my own father didn't know existed. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something heavier than that. The weight of knowing that the people who should have been proudest of me were the very people I had spent 4 years hiding this from. And the reason I had hidden it was something I would have to face very soon. For 3 weeks, I lived in that house alone, and nobody in my family knew where I had gone. My mother called several times, and each time I told her only that I was fine, that I had somewhere to stay, without giving her a single detail. Daniel texted once, a short message asking if I needed money, which told me exactly how little any of them still understood about what my life had actually become. I spent those weeks deciding what to do with the truth I had been carrying for 4 years, because a house that size doesn't stay hidden forever, and I knew the moment was coming whether I chose it or not. That moment came sooner than I expected, when one of my father's oldest friends, a man who worked in real estate on the side, happened to be showing a property 2 houses down from mine, and he recognized my car in the driveway. Word travels fast in a city the size of ours, especially among men like my father who talk business over coffee every morning, and within 2 days, my father showed up at that gate himself, unannounced, standing there the same way I had stood on his porch weeks earlier, except this time he was the one without answers. I watched him on the security camera for almost a full minute before I opened that gate, and when I finally walked outside to meet him, I saw something on his face I had never seen in 26 years of being his son. Not anger, not disappointment, but something closer to confusion, like the version of me he thought he understood had never actually existed. He asked me how long. He asked me why I never told him. And for the first time since that night at the dinner table, I told him everything: the investments, the land, the years of silence, and the reason behind every bit of it. That I had learned from watching him my whole life that he could never let another man succeed on terms he didn't control, not even his own son. My father stood in that driveway for a long time without speaking, looking at a house that represented everything he had spent his life working toward, built by a son he had thrown out for supposedly having nothing at all. My father didn't say much else that day. He asked to see the inside of the house, and I let him in, and we walked through room after room in a silence that felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Before he left that afternoon, he turned to me at the door, the same kind of door he had once told me to walk out of, and he said the only thing he really needed to say. He said he was sorry, not just for that night, but for every year before it that had led me to believe hiding my life from him was safer than sharing it. I wish I could tell you that moment fixed everything between us, but the truth is more complicated than that. We speak now, more than we used to, and he's met my wife, and he's seen the life I built. But there's a distance that 4 years of silence created, a distance that hasn't fully closed even now. My brother Daniel took it harder than anyone expected, and it took him almost a year to stop feeling like the years he'd spent trying to make our father proud had somehow been the wrong choice all along. As for me, I don't regret staying quiet for as long as I did, because I finally understood something about my father that no conversation could have taught me, that some people only recognize your worth once they can see it with their own eyes, and by then, it's already too late to take back the years they spent doubting you. So here's the question I want to leave you with tonight. If the people closest to you refused to believe in what you were building, would you have waited in silence the way I did, or would you have confronted them the moment you had the chance? Let us know in the comments below. We genuinely want to hear your side of this story. And if this kept you watching until the very end, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, because there are more stories like this one still to come. Stories about the quiet ways people rebuild their lives after the people who were supposed to believe in them first didn't.